All right, welcome back. This is the fourth and last lecture for this week. We were talking about the article, What Content Area Teachers Should Know About Adolescent Literacy. And I already went over the first part of that document, which discussed the 5 key components of reading. And now we're going to quickly discuss assessment, writing, and motivation pertaining to adolescent readers. So assessments, this portion should hopefully be a nice review for you. The first type of assessment being summative or end of the unit, end of the chapter, end of the year type of conclusive assessment, which is different than a formative assessment, which informs instruction along the way. Different examples they provided of formative assessments include teacher questioning, looking at different categories of questioning, teacher observation, and then a performance-based assessment or classroom-based assessment. And then the last type of assessment being diagnostic assessment, which a lot of you just gave the Words Their Way spelling inventory, which is a great diagnostic tool that shows you, within what developmental spelling stage do you need to do some further, assessment. As a lot of you pointed out in your reflection, that there isn't very many assessment items within each of the different skills, so possibly doing further assessment once you identify what area the student needs help. So that would be a good diagnostic. And again, make sure that you have multiple sources of assessment, multiple forms of data, which goes back to those standards of reading assessment from that we read, way back in week 1, which talked about having multiple sources of data as well to inform your decision making. Next, in the area of writing, they discussed how skilled writers learn to be self-directed and goal-oriented, which is the goal for all learners, is to get them to be self-directed and goal-oriented. Without writing skills, students lack an effective communication and learning tool. And when you think about the context of this course, even though it's an online course, how much writing you do, and in any, college courses, high school courses, how important writing is for communication and why it's so important for us to make sure that our students are well equipped. We should be providing direct instruction for the writing process using a gradual release. Huge area that often gets underutilized maybe is pre-writing. We're noticing that with our students in analyzing performance on state writing tests that they're really struggling with ideas and organization, which are 2 things that should be fleshed out at the pre-writing stage. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to put together a quality paper if you don't have a clear idea and structure before going into it. So definitely make sure you teach your students the value of pre-writing. Provide a supportive instructional environment, and also using rubrics to assess, and also using rubrics for students to assess themselves and self-reflect. So that was some of the information from the authors on writing. Lastly, we're going to talk about motivation, which we discussed motivation in general when we started working with your first student. But motivation is an individual's goals, values, and beliefs regarding reading. It also includes self-efficacy, or how successful or confident they feel in doing a skill. Motivated readers are determined, self-regulated, and engaged. But there is a decline in motivation for adolescents, especially adolescent students that may be struggling in an area. And I think that's one thing that really separates the emergent students from the adolescent students is, over the years of being told that they are behind, they're not reading as well, seeing books, large chapter books that their peers are reading that they're not, that whole idea of self-fulfilling prophecy where when they are being told, you're not a very good reader, they start to believe that, which impacts their motivation. And so being an older student, the repercussions and the impact of hearing that same message for more years, whether it's, covertly or overtly communicated, they're still picking up on the fact that they're not reading at the same level as their peers. It starts to kind of put a damper on their attitude toward reading. Grading practices can also put a decline in their motivation, as well as tracking. If they know they're in the remedial reading course, they might be less motivated to try because they just might be giving up already. So motivation is huge for adolescent readers, especially adolescent readers who have some gaps and need some intervention and instruction. So it's really important to motivate that student, help them to set clear goals and to monitor progress toward those goals, and help them set goals that are attainable so that once they do, attain that first goal, then they're feeling successful and more confident. You also want to provide them variety and choice so they, are more invested in what you're working on if they're choosing the options or their varieties. And definitely this week you're going to be giving an interest inventory to your, older student, adolescent learner, so that way you can hopefully bring in their interests into your further sessions to motivate them. And then help them to interact through reading. I mean, definitely making reading an interactive process. All right, that's it for content this week. Hopefully you feel a little more skilled in grouping strategies and planning next steps for instruction, and also have some more information on adolescent readers. Essentially, you're going through the same process of that clinical process of diagnosing using a variety of assessment tools and then pinpointing where the need is in order to, prescribe an intervention. But the biggest thing to think about with these adolescent students is, not automatically assuming they need phonics and decoding and phonemic awareness, because they don't always. And then also really being attentive to their self-confidence, self-efficacy, and their motivation to read. And it's going to be a little bit more challenging for you if they're not as motivated to help them, overcome those, feelings of just where they lack confidence. All right, to launch you, I was going to do the Simple Truths video, but realized I already did that. So I thought that I would pull a TED Talk, which I don't know if you've ever watched any of the TED Talks, but they're all educationally related, really interesting, really, really high quality, interesting ideas. But being as how we're talking about adolescent students, middle, high school, this is a TED Talk I watched recently. It's actually about math instruction, and it's done by Dan Meyer, who I don't know if you've heard of, but he is the founder and co-creator of 3-Act Math, which is really cool. And it gives you like real world applicable problems for your students to solve for math. It's very Common Core. But I really just wanted to share his opening line with you on the challenge of teaching adolescent students that I thought was clever and funny. And you're welcome to keep watching if you'd like. It is a math video though, so you don't have to. But I thought he had a pretty witty beginning, and I thought it worked well with what we're talking about, adolescent learners and the motivation piece.
Can I ask you to please recall a time when you really loved something, a movie, an album, a song, or a book, and you recommended it wholeheartedly to someone you also really liked? and you anticipated that reaction, you waited for it, and it came back, and the person hated it. So by way of introduction, that is the exact same state in which I spend every working day of the last 6 years. I teach high school math. I sell a product to a market that doesn't want it, but is forced by law to buy it. I mean, it's just a losing proposition. So there's a useful stereotype about students that I see. A useful stereotype about you all. I could give you guys Algebra 2 final exam, and I would expect no higher than a 25% pass rate. And both of these facts say less about you or my students than they do about what we call math education in the U.S. today. So I'd like to talk about some problems that we're having with this. And to start with, I'd like to break math down into two categories. One is computation. This is the stuff you've forgotten. For example, factoring quadratics with leading coefficient greater than 1. Okay? This stuff is also really easy to relearn, provided that you have a really strong grounding in reasoning, math reasoning. We'll call it the application of math processes to the world around us. This is hard to teach. This is what we would love students to retain, even if they don't go into mathematical fields. This is also something that the way we teach it in the U.S., all but ensures they won't retain it. So I'd like to talk about why that is, why that's such a calamity for society, what we can do about it, and to close with why this is an amazing time to be a math teacher. Okay. So first, five symptoms that you're doing math reasoning wrong in your classroom. Okay. One is a lack of initiative. Your students don't self-start. You finish your lecture block, and immediately you have 5 hands going up, asking you to re-explain the entire thing at their desks. Students lack perseverance. They lack retention. You find yourself re-explaining concepts 3 months later, wholesale. There's an aversion to word problems, which describes 99% of my students, and then the other 1% are eagerly looking for the formula to apply in that situation. Okay? This is really destructive. David Milch, a creator of Deadwood and other amazing TV shows, has a really good description for this. He swore off creating contemporary drama, shows set in the present day, because he saw that when people fill their mind with 4 hours a day of, for example, 2.5 Men, No Disrespect, it shapes the neural pathways, he said, in such a way that they expect simple problems. He called it an impatience with irresolution. You're impatient with things that don't resolve quickly. You expect sitcom-sized problems that wrap up in 22 minutes, 3 commercial breaks, and a laugh track. And I'll put it to all of you, what you already know, that no problem we're solving is that simple. I'm very concerned about this because I'm going to retire in a world that my students will run. I'm doing bad things to my own future and well-being when I teach this way.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. If you want to keep watching, you can just YouTube TED Talk, Dan Meyer, and it should come up. But very interesting talk, albeit focused on math instruction. But I enjoyed his point that he's peddling a product that some people just don't want to buy but are required by law to purchase. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy your week, and I will see you next week.